Welcome to the radio. This is the radio show HugsOnline, presented by CEI and supported by Erasmus+. And we are here, a few volunteers, taking part in EVS projects in Stara Zagora. And we are attending a conference on Thursday. It's about living and working in Bulgaria. And we have Petya here to tell us a little bit about that. So what is the conference, or what is the idea of the conference? What do we want to achieve from it?
Конференцията ще бъде насочена преди всичко към млади хора и основната идея е да се съберат на едно място младежи, които биха искали да живеят и работят в България, да знаят.
The conference is addressing youngsters mainly, so the idea is to gather together young people who are willing to stay and live and work in Bulgaria.
Основната идея е не да кажат какво искат от държавата или общината, а какво самите те биха променили в средата, в която живеят и работят, за да бъде тя добра за тях.
So the main idea is not to ask something from the state or from the local authorities, but the youngsters to say what they would change in their environment so that it gets better for living and staying in Bulgaria.
And the participants, they're all volunteers, right?
Не са доброволци. Голяма част от младежите са ученици, студенти или работещи в България.
Not all of them are volunteers. Some of them are students, high school students also, working people who are staying in Bulgaria.
And how many people are there taking part in this project?
Очакваме около 80 души, като основната част ще бъдат младежи, но ще има една група, която ще се състои от хора, работещи в общини и други институции и отговарящи за работата с младежи.
About 80 people in total. Most of them will be youngsters, but there will be also people working in institutions that are responsible for dealing with young people and deciding on youth policies.
And will the results be announced somewhere, or?
Да, в края на конференцията ще бъдат изведени основните идеи, които имат младежите, и в последствие те ще бъдат разпространени сред общините от региона, за които е основно конференцията.
The ideas after the discussions will be summarized and they will be presented to the local authorities working in the region of the conference.
Също ще бъдат предоставени на организациите, с които си партнираме при организирането на конференцията.
And also the summarized results will be given to the NGOs that are cooperating with us when we are organizing this event.
Това са Центъра за европейски инициативи, Международния младежки център и Центъра за работа с младежи към община Стара Загора.
So in this case, these are the Center for European Initiatives, the International Youth Center, and also a center that's dealing with youngsters, and it's part of the local authorities.
По този начин биха могли да се търсят общи инициативи между общините и организациите, така че общинските администрации да подкрепят идеите на младите хора за промяна.
So what we are trying to do is to facilitate the process of finding common initiatives that will involve also local authorities together with NGOs, so that we help youngsters to feel better in Bulgaria.
Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about the program, or?
Ние се радваме много на присъствието на доброволци на конференцията, защото се надяваме, че те ще споделят опит, който имат в собствените си страни и ще участват в формиране на нови идеи за инициативи на младежите в нашата страна.
We are actually that foreign volunteers are attending the event also because we are expecting from you to share ideas and experience and interesting projects in your countries that will probably help us have a modified vision about what we need in Bulgaria as well.
So we are looking forward to going to the conference on Thursday, and CEI is very happy to be a part of it. And thank you for coming, Petja. Our topic today is World War II, and we would like to start by introducing ourselves. And my name is Snædís Sunna Tolasius, and I'm from Iceland.
My name is Þórdís and I'm also from Iceland. I am Victoria from Ukraine.
I'm Yeva from Lithuania.
My name is Kata and I come from Hungary.
So my first question is, did your country take part in the Second World War? Yeva, I'll start with you.
Yes, my country is Lithuania, and it's kind of the country between Germany and Russia. So a lot of fighting happened in our territory.
Okay, and were you on a site? Did you have an army that was fighting?
Well, at one point we kind of had an army that was starting to fight, but well, since we were under someone's occupation most of the time, so we didn't really have a choice.
So you were just a battlefield in the middle?
Yeah, kind of,
Okay,
in a way.
yeah. Vika, tell us a little bit about Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine was participating in the Second World War, and as it was occupied by Soviet Union when the war started, so we were like allies, let's say, with we were fighting on the side of Soviet Army, Red Army, that's how they call it. But at the same time we were fighting against it, and it's really a complicated topic. Yeah.
Kata, tell us a little bit about Hungary.
Yes, we have an example, but not about the Second War, First War, because Trianon has closed First World War with a peace treaty. After Trianon border is terminated, as not anymore. So we lost a big territory.
In the World War One?
Yes.
Okay, but in the World War Two?
No, just in World War One.
Okay, but Hungary did take part in the Second World War?
No, because the World War One lost territory, and the Second World War still lost this part. So nowadays we have a smaller country.
Okay. As we've heard with Lithuania, their part in the World War was to be a battlefield. Did your country lose a lot of lives?
Yes, a lot. Well, partly because when we were under Soviet occupation, a lot of Lithuanian people and Jewish people were taken, and all those that could oppose were killed or otherwise taken somewhere so they couldn't oppose. And the same was when Germany occupied us. They took people who could oppose, like intelligent people and those with power, and took them to gulags, lagers. Yeah, lager camps. And after that we were occupied by Russians again, and they also took everyone who could oppose. Like everyone who associated themselves with the enemy were considered dangerous, and they were just disposed of.
Mm-hmm. Vika, can you tell us a little bit how and why and when Ukraine started participating in the war?
Well, as you know, the Second World War started on the 1st September 1939, but let's say officially, Ukraine was involved in a war when Germans strike on 22nd of June in 1941. That's like when the war started on Ukraine's territory. Yeah, and during the war, Ukraine was the whole part of territory of Ukraine was occupied for almost 3 years by German army, and during the first year, a lot of people, around like 4 million Ukrainian men, were mobilized to the army to fight against Germans, and the statistics says that only 3% of them returned after the war ended. And at the beginning, also by some statistics, it's like in Ukraine the population was around 41 million, and when the war ended it was around 27 million people. So they say that Ukraine lost like the biggest number of lives, like more than all the European countries that were involved in a war combined.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was that because so many were fighting in the army, or was it also because there was a battlefield on your country?
Mostly, yeah, because for 3 years the battlefield was on the whole territory of Ukraine, but also because, how to say it, as I said, Ukraine was also occupied before the war by Russians, like by Soviet Union, and those who were not agreeing with Russian politics, they were also repressed, sent to concentration camps, and like were political prisoners. And when the war started, a lot of Ukrainians, like even those who were not supposed by age to be in the army, were still sent to the war.
And I would like to ask Þórdís now from Iceland about the participation of Iceland in the war.
So Iceland is very special because we have we decided many years ago that in every war we were going to be neutral. We're not going to be on anybody's side. So geographically, geographically we are very in a good place because we're right in the middle of America and then the Europe. So both the American and Brits want to set up a base here, but Icelandic people didn't want to. But on 10th of May 1940, the Brits came and they kind of just came. Like they gave a very little warning, but people heard the planes going over Iceland like the nights before. But so yeah, they came with I think 1,000 or 700 something soldiers, and the police chief came, and he came to the docks, and he was supposed to read the soldiers the laws of Iceland and tell them okay, this is what you have to follow and whatever. But he was alone, and in the ships there were 700 soldiers. So they kind of didn't listen to him and just walked past him. So this poor man was trying to tell 700 soldiers what the rules were in Iceland and what the law were, but they didn't care. They were just here, and we didn't have anything to say about it. It just happened. So that's how Iceland started participating.
Well, the Germans also wanted to have a base here, but the Brits heard about it and they decided, okay, we'll do it now. So they had to be in a hurry because the Brits had most of their army on sea, and the sea and the naval force was very, very big for them, and they needed it. And if the Germans had occupied Iceland, then they would have closed a big gate for the Brits for transportation to America and everything. So they really needed to have us occupied so they could use our sea and use us for airplanes as well.
Yeah, so the war was actually good for Iceland because we got jobs, we got Before the army came, we had a lot of unemployment and a financial crisis, but with the war, there came a lot of jobs for the soldiers that Icelandic people could do, building houses and a lot of things like airports and such things. So the war was actually like good for Iceland. I know it's really awful to say it, but it actually was like it was the thing that like saved us, because if there hadn't been any war, we wouldn't have gotten any jobs. Then people would have just like been unemployed and starved to death or something. So, and also because like we were so far away from everything that like nobody was attacking us because we're an island. Nobody can get to us. Well, the sea like the sea ships can do it, but they weren't really doing it because we're so far away.
And I'm going to ask Kata a little bit about Hungary's participation in the World War. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah, we had we had a participation in Second World War, and I've forgotten said before that the most of losses of Hungary in Second World War. Hungarian army near the River Don and Hungarian Judaism, the two topic. The Hungarian government called out 200,000 soldiers to Eastern Front lines. It was infantry. It means foot and horse, and the opposite side, Soviet cruiser tank, more thousands. And I want to tell more numbers. 437,000 people were deported trans-border into lagers, Auschwitz, and 380 Hungarian people died.
Vika, can I ask you a little bit about the aftermath after the war, how it affected Ukraine?
Well, it did affect it because, as I said, we were in this war mostly from the beginning, and the main Ukraine was like a battlefield for the almost whole duration when Germans came and when they invaded our country, and after that when they started retreating, still Ukraine was because it was like on the border. So we lost a lot of people, as I told you already, and after the war it was even worse because we became a part of Soviet Union again, and there was a big drought, and the famine started, and but in Soviet time there was this thing, there were quotas. For example, as you know, maybe Ukraine was called like a great bread basket of Europe, so we were always exporting to Europe bread, like wheat and bread, and we had these quotas imposed on us that this year we should import this amount, and because of famine we couldn't how to say it. Okay. There was not enough harvest, so what was done, I don't know, this secret police were coming to every people's house and was taking in their private harvest that they collected, everything they could find. So people were starving to death after it, even after the war. And also a lot of villages during the war and cities or towns were burnt to the ground, with people. So there were stories that people were just taken to the church and the church was burned with people inside there. And actually, even when the war started and Germans invaded the territory of Ukraine and Red Army was retreating, not to leave anything for Germans, Red Army also was destroying everything they could, like all industrial places in Ukraine on the Dnieper River. We had a really big, like the biggest in Europe, hydro station, and not to leave it for Germans, Red Army just exploded it, and they destroyed it completely. And such things were done everywhere. So some factories, plants, they were just collected and taken to the east, closer to Ural, a part in Russia, and also a lot of scientists, intelligent people were also taken back. They were given this protection not to participate in war because they needed scientists, to create, to design military anything. Yeah.
So it wasn't a really happy thing when the war ended for you, or?
No, it wasn't,
No.
because no, the whole country was damaged, and still we were under Russian occupation that people were not happy about, because before the Second World War, Ukraine was divided by territory was divided, and one part, eastern part, was belonging to Soviet Union, and the other was to Czechoslovakia at the time. And then they gave independence to the Western Ukraine, and for a year, I think, that part was independent. And then Soviet Union occupied it as well. So the best thing that happened after the war ended is that Ukrainian territory was united again.
Yeah.
But still, and actually, because Ukrainians wanted to be independent and Soviet Union wanted them to be a part of it, there were a lot of people who were against it. And so Soviet government was afraid of counter-revolution inside our country, so there were a lot of political prisoners. And when Hitler came, those prisoners were just killed because Red Army was retreating and they couldn't leave them there. And they couldn't take them because it's a lot of people, so they were just killing them, because if they stayed they could help Hitler's army, because they would fight against Russians for sure. Yeah, and there are also stories that when Hitler came, a lot of Ukrainians in Western Ukraine especially were welcoming German army, because they thought that nothing is worse than Red Army occupation, like that.
So Yeva, for Lithuania, was it the same experience, that it wasn't a happy thought when the war ended?
Well, kinda yes, but the reason is a little different. Well, when the First World War ended, we finally got our independence and we enjoyed it for 20 years. So when the Second World War started, Russians or Germans had an agreement, and they decided that Lithuania is part of Russia, it belongs to Russia, and they kind of gave us our independence, we can do whatever we want, but half a year later they just occupied us, and we had our own government, but they had to report everything to Soviet Union, and they also had to obey their orders. We kind of had our independence, but we couldn't do anything we wanted. Then later on, when Germans were winning, Russia just left us. Also, they already killed a lot of people who were opposing. And, well, then we were under German occupation. They also did the same, killing everyone who's against them. So only those who, couldn't choose their side, they all had to hide everything, lived like it. And then in the end of the war, during 1943, I think, Russians kind of saved us, but it was also they gave us our independence, so only to take it away a little while later. And then they occupied us again, and then we were under their occupation until 1990, I think 1990. Yeah, and we were fighting them, but since we didn't have our own army, we didn't have any power to oppose them, we had to go through different means. So basically trying to make a revolution and to destroy it from the inside, kind of.
Why didn't you have your own army?
Well, because before the First World War we were under Russians, and well, they took everyone who could fight, so we couldn't just create our army because we had only 20 years where we kind of started an army, but that wasn't enough to prepare for it, so we're just left to be as we are.
Kata, you wanted to tell us a little story?
Yes, I have a story about Second World War in my family, because father of my grandfather, him taken in Serbia, and after that in Vladivostok. Vladivostok, it is located east part of Asia, so close to Japan, and after that he came on foot in Hungary. Yes, and he survived. So the story is happy end. Yeah, survived, and he 40 kilogram was.
But it's like, I'm not sure, but around 5,000 kilometers, if not more.
But it's true story. So not just on food, but mostly on food.
So how long did it take for him to get back? Was it like years and years, or
Yeah.
months?
Yeah, months. Yeah.
Months.
Months,
Yeah,
yeah.
in plural. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeva, you had a story about your family as well. No, Vika, I was gonna say a family member.
Well, not with happy end, I'd say, because on my mom's side, when the war started, my grandma was only 2 years old, and in the family she had 2 brothers and a sister. So when the war started, her dad went to war, like in the first rows or something, and then 1 year later or something, because it was winter, it was really hard to be with 4 little kids. Her mom was always working, and she fell ill, and then she died, so they all were left as orphans. Yeah, and so my grandma spent some years like her childhood in orphanage, and then she just at 16 started working. But her dad, they didn't receive any news for him. So, and then like there is this thing when like missing, no one knows whether he's dead or alive because no news came. And then I know when I already was born, there was one like a TV show, like broadcasted it, but at the same time they help people to find some lost relatives or friends, like long ago that you lost long ago. So they wrote to that program, like to find him, because it's possible like that. And they had like connections everywhere, and they like received an answer that during the war, like he almost went through the whole war, and he died like somewhere in Austria. And then one woman from the village my grandma is from, she also lost some relative, and she went to Austria to find like the grave, like there is like like mass grave or something. And she like confirmed that information, that she also saw like the name of my grandfather on that grave. Yeah.
Well, the only stories that I have from the war are like good stories, so it's kind of bad. But both of my grandparents on my mom's and dad's side lived at the seaside, so like they came like in contact with the soldiers. So like my grandmother has like stories from where like the soldiers were like on these big trucks, and like the truck would drive through the neighborhood, and like all of the kids would like hear them coming and like come out, and they would run after them and like scream like gum, gum, gum. And then the soldiers would like throw out gum, and it was like the first time that they ever had like tasted gum or like candy.
Yeah, and also my grandma said when she was already in the orphanage, um, she told that she's from Western Ukraine, and when Ukraine was already occupied by Germans, that the most like civil, if you can say that, were like Italians to people who lived there, because they were not that ruthless and not that cruel. And they actually helped people there, and they gave kids chocolate
Yeah.
whenever they could. So it wasn't that bad in their village also, because Italian like division or something was there.
That's good. Well, I have another story from a grandfather. He used to go to like on the port there was like a big kitchen that like cooked food for all of the soldiers, and like he and his friends, they would like go and they would like go and talk to the like women who worked at the kitchen. Were like, please, can you give us something? And they would like give him fruits and chocolate and stuff. And also he was like, I talked to him about it a couple of years ago, and he was like reminiscing about when he used to take like walks on the beach, and all along the beach side he would see like grapefruits. So it is basically a ship which was like importing fruits or something from Europe to whatever, America or something. It would get bombed, and like all of the things that they had inside would go to the sea, and then the fruits would like go with the sea up to land, and they like landed all of like he just like he remembers like going to the beach to pick up fruit. Like he would come home and taste all this fruit, and it was such happy times. And then the like American soldiers would bring like comics, so it was like the first time that he read a comic book, and that was like amazing. So it was like, it's kind of hard to listen to all of your bad stories when I talk to my relatives and they have like good stories, so it's kind of horrible. But yeah.
And I would like to talk a little bit about the Icelandic, how Iceland perceived the war. So as Thordis had told us before, we got a lot of like new things to Iceland that we hadn't had before, and most of that was because when the Brits really needed their army that they had in Iceland, they asked the US to come instead and fill in their place. So the US army came to Iceland and took over all of the stations for the aircrafts and for the ships and everything. And they were much more polished, they had much more money, and because of this we got a lot of like the gums and the comics and everything. And there was also a kind of situation, because the number of the soldiers from the US and from Britain, they were as many as men in Iceland. So we had doubled the amount of men. And of course, a lot of Icelandic women thought that they were very interesting, and they had so good manners and were much better looking and everything. They had all these American music, they had dances and everything. So a lot of Icelandic women started being with the soldiers, and people didn't like it. All the grown-ups didn't like it, and like the Minister of Judiciary, he like started an investigation of these relationships, and the police tracked more than 500 women, and some of them were like called prostitutes, and they were accused of betraying their home country and like spoiling the Icelandic blood. And some of them were put in like institutions outside of the city because they were just considered crazy. And a lot of them, of course, had babies as well, and it was really not well seen. People really looked down on these children, and some of them had American last names or British last names, but most of them, because the soldiers left, they didn't stay, and most of the children were called Hansson, which means just his son. So, but Hans is also a name in Iceland, so it kind of works. It's like the father's name was Hans, but they're actually just saying it was his son because they don't know the name. They can't take up like the name. So this was like most of the most interesting thing about the war. I think Icelandic people think this situation. But we also got our independence in the Second World War because Denmark was invaded by Germany on the 9th of April 1940, and we had a contract with Denmark that we had made in 1918, where it said that we mostly controlled everything in Iceland, but we had the Danish king still, so he was like the monarch over Iceland. So when Germany invaded Denmark, we said, well, the Danish king can't do his job now, so we'll just wait until our agreement has run out, because it was supposed to be for 25 years. So in 1943, it had run out, and we just said, okay, you can't do what you're supposed to do, we're just going. And they were like trying to oppose it and like saying, no, this is not right because we're being occupied and everything. We were like, we don't give anything. We just wanted our independence. So on 17th of June 1944, we had our Independence Day, and it is the Icelandic national holiday, independence holiday. And well, we had some bad things from the war. Well, we got our independence and we got globalized and everything, but we did lose some people because a lot of Icelandic fishermen were out fishing in the sea, and there were German submarines and there were German aircrafts and everything that were bombing the ships, and we had some shipwrecks, and we read on the internet that there were around 230 people who died because of the war, and 130 of them died in naval attacks in the ocean, where there were just innocent people fishing. But we also had that opportunity that we could fish, we could go out fishing and we could export our fish, which a lot of other nations like Britain and other nations couldn't do because all of the people were just in the war and they were all surrounded by submarines and everything. So we also got rich because we could sell our fish, and we are still doing that. So Yeva, you wanted to tell us a little bit about how the Soviet Union...
Yeah, well, after the World War, we were left under Soviet Union, and well, I've heard stories that we had money, but the problem was that there wasn't enough to spend it on, like clothes, food, everything, because most of what was grown, what was made, was taken to Soviet Union for themselves. They just kind of used us as manpower, and well, we were like that for a long time. We were fighting it, but there wasn't much we could do. And in the end of the war, of the occupation, in 1988, we, Lithuanians, together with Latvians and Estonians, decided that we need to do something, and in the name of the day when the contract between Germany and Russians were signed, that that all three Baltic states are to be Russians, we created kind of an event. We call it Baltic Road. It was an event where the people of all three nations joined hands. We're kind of a human chain through all the capitals of every country, and it was seen as an act of rebellion, because we were talking about our independence before that, and we were getting a lot of new rights. For example, our national clothes, and any other symbolics were allowed then already. So it was like one of the steps in destroying the Soviet Union. And 2 years later, we finally announced our independence, which was finally seen by other countries. And Iceland was the first one to recognize us a month after we announced us our independence. Yeah.
Casimir, I would like to tell us a little bit about Bulgaria and the Second World War.
What do you want to know?
How and why you participated, like you were telling us.
Well, according to Bulgarian history books and according to what we have learned at school, Bulgarian politicians joined the war supporting Germany because Bulgarian royal family at that time was connected with the German royal family, so it was pretty normal to support Germany. That was the same mistake that they did earlier in the First World War, and actually that war and the results ruined Bulgarian economy, ruined the Bulgarian territory, because after the war, when signing the Berlin contract, Bulgarian politicians signed the obligation of paying so much money to the winners, to the winning countries, something that Bulgaria could actually not afford. And the people had to pay for those money for 50 years afterwards, and still not not being able to recover the economy. Germany is a big country, but Bulgaria is not. We are dependent by so many others that are powerful, more powerful, and that's why actually the war ruined Bulgarian economy. This is something that nobody could deny at that moment, but the war actually also resulted in another interesting phenomena in Bulgarian society. Bulgarians looked at the Soviet Union and the Soviet army as people who actually helped us get our freedom. Bulgaria was not occupied because we were supporting the aggressors, but still when the Soviet army came here, Bulgarians were happy to meet them, to give them all they had, and to greet them as friends. So from now on, also Bulgarian historical textbooks and Bulgarian schools started teaching that Germany is bad and Soviet Union, afterwards Russia, is the good one. So it's the direct result from the war issues.
So did you have any Soviet Union-ish politicians? Like, was the idea of the Soviet Union, did you embrace it and make it your own in Bulgaria, or did you just build your own?
Well, Bulgarian policy afterwards was very much connected with what the Soviet Union was doing and with the policy that the Soviet Union was having at that time. Bulgaria was very often accepted as the 16th country, 16th state, member state of the European. Come on. Yeah, it might make a common cliche. Anyway, but you know what I mean. Bulgaria was so much connected with the big brother, as we called it, that at schools, children were motivated and encouraged to be pen friends with Russian children, which is in a way good because, international cooperation. But on the other hand, English language was forbidden. English movies were forbidden, English music was forbidden too, and the only thing that we respected was Russia, Soviet Union. We even had to watch the news from Russia on Friday evenings instead of watching Bulgarian television. The national television was broadcasting Russian television and was showing Russian news. So you can imagine the influence Soviet Union had on Bulgarian society.
Well, for my part, when I came here, I actually thought that Bulgaria had been in the Soviet Union. And I always thought, because you can see like the Soviet, just the buildings and everything that reminds you of what you've seen, like from Soviet movies or something like that.
Yeah, I think all the post-communist countries have these issues, like the red star on the buildings, the same type of buildings actually. For example, if I go to Budapest, I feel like I'm in Sofia because the buildings are the same, the cars are everything's the same because we have the same post-totalitarian background. And this is a direct result from the war.
So now we've told you everything we know about the Second World War, everything that our countries went through and experienced, and we would like to thank you for listening. And we have another show tomorrow at 5, yes?
But also tonight.
And we have another show tonight about sexual education
Right.
at 8 o'clock. So stay tuned.
And tomorrow, what time is it, the show tomorrow?
5.
Okay.
Yeah, story time at 5 tomorrow. So, yeah, thanks for listening and have a great evening.